Afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon are questions to the First Minister. And question 1 is Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Pa drafodaethau mae'r Prif Weinidog wedi cynnal gyda Llywodraeth y Dain Ysgrifenol ynglŷn â datganoli rhagor o bywydau i Gymru?
A sawl trafodaeth wedi cymryd lle dros yr wythnosau am misoedd diwethaf.
Fel byddwn ni'n gobeithio, Prif Weinidog. Un enghraifft o lle mae datganoli honedig wedi bod yn methiant i Gymru yw datganoli digwyddodd gyda heddlu a sefydlu Comisiynwyr Heddlu, achos mae hwnna wedi arwain at mwy o benderfyniadau pwysig i ni yng Nghymru yn cael eu cymryd tu fas i Gymru, dweud y gwir. Os ydrychwch chi ar y siampl diweddara, y hyfrenydd yn Dyfed Powys yn Penbre yn cael ei symud gan benderfyniad tu fas i Gymru. Yn eich barn chi, a fydd y heddlu yn cael ei datganoli ar ôl etholiad cyffredinol San Steffan nesaf?
Wrth gwrs ynglyn â fflaid eraill, ond ynglyn â Blaid i, wrth gwrs mae'r ymrwyniad wedi cael ei wneud i datganoli yr heddlu ynglyn â strwythyr y heddlu yng Nghymru, ynglyn â'r pwer i sicrhau beth dylen ni gael comisiynwyr neu na, ac wrth gwrs mae yna rhywbeth i groesawu.
Paul Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. Mae'n amlwg fydd fwy o bwerau yn cael ei ddatganoli i Gymru yn y dyfodol agos. Mae hefyd yn hanfodol ein bod ni'n gweld pwerau yn cael ei ddatganoli o'r lle hwn i gymunedau ar draws Cymru. Yn yr amgylchiadau, gallwch chi gadarnhau os byddwch chi yn dal i fod yn brif weinidog dros y blynyddoedd nesaf, byddwch chi yn sicrhau bydd mwy o bwerau yn cael ei ddatganoli yn agosach at bobl, a pha drafodaethau i chi wedi cael gyda Ysgrifennydd Cymru ynglŷn a datganoli pwerau i gymunedau ar draws Cymru?
Wel, bydd hwnna'n rhywbeth wrth gwrs i Ysgrifennydd Cymru, mae hwnna wedi cael ei datganoli. Ar ôl wrth gwrs i ailstrwythuro Llywodraeth leol yng Nghymru, wedyn ni wrth gwrs bod ni'n sefyllfa i sicrhau pa bwerau dylai gael ei roi iddyn nhw, a hefyd i'r cynghorau trefi a chymunedau. Un o'r pethau wrth gwrs mae'r papur gwyn yn sôn amdano yw ymha ffordd allan ni ddatganoli pwerau i nhw, allan trin pob un nhw'n yr un ffordd achos y gwahanol maint sydd gan y cynghorau eu hunan, ond wy o blaid sicrhau bod ni'n gallu datganoli lawr i gymunedau lle mae'n bosib i wneud hynny.
Question 2, Sandy Mewis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you make a statement on the impact unnecessary 999 call-outs are having on emergency ambulance services in North Wales?
Well, they place additional pressure on ambulance services across the whole of Wales, diverting resources away, of course, from life-threatening incidences. We do continue to encourage members of the public to use Choose Well and, of course, to only use the 999 services for genuine medical emergencies.
Thank you for that. I welcome the £11 million investment recently announced to improve the performance of the ambulance service, but new figures show that 1 in 6 calls in North Wales last year could have been dealt with by another NHS service. What other initiative, apart from the Choose Well campaign, are being taken to reduce the number of these unnecessary 999 calls, which will ease the pressure on the ambulance service and ensure patients get the treatments that they actually need?
Well, 3 things. Choose Well, which the member has referred to, making sure that people understand that the first place to go in many instances is a pharmacy, and then of course possibly a practice nurse, GP and so forth, but also using 111 as a service rather than 999 to obtain medical advice to see whether in fact a 999 call is needed, and of course improving access to GPs. We've seen great progress in that regard since 2012.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, with the proposed changes at Ysbyty Gwan Clwyd in relation to maternity obstetrics and gynecology, what assessment have you made of the additional pressures on the ambulance service in North Wales in respect of mothers that may need to be transported? We know that 46% of new mothers maybe need to be transported from an all-midwife-led unit, and 10% of mothers anticipating normal birth. So what measures have you taken to assess that impact?
Well, it's a matter, of course, for the local health board. There will undoubtedly be an impact in terms of having to take some mothers from the area to Wrexham and to Bangor, and that's why, of course, it's absolutely essential that the current situation at Glan Clwyd is purely temporary.
Claire Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Yn sicr mae galwadau dianhenraid yn cyfrannu at y broblem, ond wrth gwrs y gwir yw bod y niferoedd o alwadau ffug, er enghraifft, wedi disgyn o dros 2,500 5 mlynedd yn ôl i rhyw 1200 wedi haneri mewn gwirionedd dros y cyfnod o 5 mlynedd ddiwetha. Ac onid y gwir yw bod rhai o broblemau a prif broblemau gwasanaeth ambulans yn seiliedig ar fethiant y Llywodraeth chi gynllunio gwasanaethau mewn modd sydd yn ateb y galw fel y gyma heddiw?
Wel, na wedi'i wneud wrth gwrs, mae Blaid E wedi sefyll yn erbyn rhai o'r newidiadau sydd wedi cael ei gymryd lle. Ni moyn sicrhau wrth gwrs bod yn gallu cael triniaeth mor agos sy'n bosib i le maen nhw'n byw, ond mae'n bwysig dros ben hefyd i sicrhau bod y triniaeth yn triniaeth saff, a sicrhau bod yr arbenigaeth ar gael mwyn sicrhau bod y triniaeth yn saff.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon, the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Arty-Davies.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, 2 weeks ago I asked you about the maternity changes that were proposed by the Health Board in North Wales around Ysbyty Glan Clwyd. You said that by the summer of 2016 those services should be reinstated. A couple of days later, the Health Minister then drew attention to what he believed it was a 12-month delay for these services to be reinstated. The Health Board have said that it could be as late as 2017 when the new intensive care unit is established. Who is correct? Because if you take any one of those dates, it is deeply troubling for anyone with maternity services who care about them in North Wales.
Let me be quite clear, we expect those services to be restored within 12 months. I have seen the reference to 18 months and beyond. We do not accept that. The Local Health Board must ensure that they're in a position to restore those services in the 12-month period that was originally envisaged.
Thank you for that very clear answer, First Minister. So certainly residents in North Wales can expect to have the service back up to a consultant-led level this time next year without a shadow of a doubt. In my view, that's a 12-month period. But the other concern came out last week when the medical director talked about, I think the words he used was sleepwalking into disaster if there wasn't a centralisation of existing services, i.e. downgrading of services at district general hospitals. Do you identify with the proposals that he has put forward, and can you see services being taken away from district general hospitals across North Wales?
No, what I can envisage is when the Cernic is established at Glan Clwyd, and let me make it absolutely clear that Glan Clwyd is the site that the Cernic will be established at, then there will be a need to examine services in Bangor and Wrexham in relation to what's provided then at the Cernic. But it has been made absolutely clear, and I make this point again to the Local Health Board, we expect that service to be restored within 12 months. This cannot be anything other than a temporary situation.
I think in fairness, in respect of the medical director, he was talking more generally about services across the DGHs across the whole of North Wales and the existence of services to be provided on all 3 sites. So I accept your assurances about the service being replaced within 12 months' time. I hope the Health Board are listening, because certainly that's not the timeline that people have been given in other areas. But obviously the medical director was talking specifically about the removal of other services at the District General Hospital across North Wales. Is it your understanding that in 12-18 months' time, the District General Hospitals in North Wales will be providing the full array of services that you would typically identify with a District General Hospital?
There is no reason to suppose otherwise, and I understand how difficult this issue is for the people who live around Glan Clwyd. I know, for example, that the Daily Post have been particularly concerned and the issues that they have raised on behalf of members of the public and indeed members themselves within this chamber, and Jones, and I mentioned Darren Mill, of course, in that regard. What I can say is that when the Cernic is established, yes, there will be a need to look at some of the services that the other DGHs provide because of the services that would then be available in the Cernic. But I do not anticipate there being major service changes in Betsy Cadwallader in the meantime, while what has to be a temporary situation at Glan Clwyd is resolved.
We now move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, city deals have brought investment and opportunities to cities like Glasgow and Sheffield, with billions of pounds of UK government being spent and invested. What discussions have you had and your government with Cardiff Council to help them design a bid for their own city deal?
It's ultimately a matter, of course, for Cardiff Council. I know that the original understanding was that City Deal money was available for English cities. That was until Glasgow, of course, received that money. And I do understand the Minister has written to the appropriate UK Government Minister requesting further information on how this could be taken forward.
Thank you, First Minister. The last we heard anything about a City Deal from your Labour colleagues on Cardiff Council, who you say need to be at the forefront of this discussion, was in November, and there has been no developments since. Perhaps the reason that no progress has been made is because, in the words of Cardiff's Labour MP Stephen Doughty, your party's running of the capital city is, and I quote, appalling. What confidence do you have in the Labour administration to bring the millions of pounds of investment that a City Deal would bring to our capital city?
Every confidence, working, of course, within the City Region Board. That much is important as well, and the Leader of the Liberal Democrats will know that the report recently published suggests there may be a potential role for a City Deal, but there needs to be a regional consensus in terms of developing a viable proposal for the future. I also see, of course, the work that Cardiff have done in terms of the Great Western Cities Initiative, and I'm fully confident that Cardiff is well able to work closely with authorities around it, and indeed those across the border, for the benefit of all.
I'm glad to hear, First Minister, that you have confidence about the ability of the leadership of Cardiff to deliver on a City Deal, because your own Deputy Minister sitting behind you claimed that he had been actively misled by the Labour leadership of the Council in recent events. Now, a City Deal could be a real engine for regenerating not just Cardiff, but the wider region. Why should anyone have faith in the leadership of Cardiff City Council when your MPs don't, Vaughan Gethin, the Deputy Minister, doesn't, and a sizable number of the Labour councillors on the Council indeed don't seem to?
But the electorate do, don't they? And we've seen the result that happened in Cardiff in 2012, and indeed all by-elections since, which show that there is certainly a strong level of support for the Labour administration running Cardiff City. I have full confidence that they are well able to deliver the economic benefits that the people of Cardiff would expect.
We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywyd. First Minister, Heriot-Watt University have published findings showing that 30% of people in Wales struggle with mental and physical pain that is associated with chronic illness. Now, your government has responded by saying that you would encourage people to work with health and voluntary organisations. Can you tell us what exactly does that mean for the 800,000 people currently in pain in Wales today?
Well, ultimately, of course, I'd expect somebody to seek medical advice in terms of the pain that they're in. It's very difficult to give a blanket response because it depends on the individual's condition. Nevertheless, I believe certainly that the health service is well able to offer the right level of pain relief to people, although for some people their conditions will be more difficult than others.
I doubt that will offer much comfort to people, First Minister. I'd like to tell you about a case of mine, someone who contacted me about a case where there was a cursory examination by a GP. The woman was prescribed paracetamol, referred for an x-ray, and told that such pain happens at a certain age. A few days later, this 60-year-old constituent was in more pain, unable to walk, and sought advice from out-of-hours help. Her GP told her that she needed an ultrasound scan, but that there could be up to a 10-month wait before that scan was carried out. The GP then suggested that the patient might consider private medicine, as the tests would then be done much quicker. First Minister, are you concerned that people are being forced to go private because they cannot cope with distressing pain for long periods of time?
Well, the Leader of Plaid Cymru has offered one example. I'm not in a position to contradict her. I don't know the person's background, of course. It sounded from what she was saying at the beginning that the complaint was against the GP rather than government in terms of the way the person had been handled at the outset. Now, without knowing the full facts surrounding the case, and I have no reason to doubt what she or her constituent are saying, it's very difficult to offer a view on an individual. However, of course, if she wants to provide me with details about the particular case, we'd be more than happy to examine them.
It's not okay, First Minister, to have to wait 10 months on the NHS. What patients want now, especially the 800,000 people who are living in pain, is a clear indication from you that things are going to get better and not worse. Now, your party is expected to unleash a further £1 billion worth of cuts to the Welsh budget if it wins the election in May. Is it not the case that as waiting lists increase, as more people are forced to live with pain for longer, more people will be going private? Is it not the case that while there is open privatisation of the NHS in England, there is hidden privatisation by the back door here in Wales?
Well, I mean, first of all, the suggestion that there's going to be £1 billion of the cuts to the Welsh budget is nonsense. And I would challenge the Leader of Plaid Cymru. She does this quite often. I challenge the Leader of Plaid Cymru to produce those figures so people can see £1 billion worth. £1 billion of the cuts, she is saying. I do not accept that for one moment. I have to say that she talks about privatisation. There is no evidence of privatisation in the Welsh NHS. We are committed to public services. We have seen, for example, pay deals that have been more favourable to staff that we very much cherish working in the NHS. We have ensured, for example, that our district general hospitals are providing the services that we think they should. We know that 9 out of 10 people do get a good service from the Welsh NHS, but it's important to focus on the 1 out of 10 people, and her constituent might well be one of those people, who don't get the service perhaps that they deserve. And that is where our efforts will be focused in the future, to make sure that those people get that service. Now, what Plaid Cymru need to explain, of course, well, I'm not going to put a question to them today, but what Plaid Cymru will need to explain over the course of the next few weeks is, if they complain about the financial situation, where then would they get the money from?
We now move back to questions on the agenda, and it's question 3, Eluned Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the Cardiff City region?
Yes, good progress is being made with the City region, and they published their vision for the growth of the region earlier this month.
Thank you, First Minister. Just 2 weeks ago, you indicated that applying for a city deal for Cardiff would be a matter for that City Region Board, not the local authorities, and you said that you would be supportive of them in that. The following day, your Economy Minister then confirmed that discussions had taken place along those lines. However, I am therefore surprised that today you seem to be suggesting that it is Cardiff Council that will be taking that matter forward. Can I ask, who has been involved in these discussions? And if it is to be Cardiff Council now leading the charge for the Cardiff City region, how will the people of the rest of the City region hold this programme democratically to account?
That seems to be completely different to what was said by her leader. But there we are. I'll try to answer her question. The reality is this, that Cardiff City, working with the other regions around the city, are in a position, should they wish to, apply for a city deal. Bear in mind, of course, that if I remember rightly, it was Glasgow and the Clyde Valley that formed part of the city deal in Scotland, not just, and I think, the city of Glasgow itself. So yes, the board itself can consider applying for a city deal. There's no difficulty in that, and it's something certainly as a government we are keen to support.
Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Obviously, for the City region to succeed, the proposals that are outlined in its report obviously need to be taken forward and enacted. I believe the report didn't have any clear recommendations, it just had bold aspirations. Do you not believe that the model of the Cardiff Bay Regeneration Board, when it regenerated this particular part of Cardiff, could be a good model to work off, especially around statutory powers, for example, to make sure that some of the proposals that are contained within the report and some of the aspirations of the board are carried through, rather than just being another bit of paper sitting on many desks across South East Wales?
I would not be in favour of setting up another quango with all the costs that would involve. I think it's perfectly possible for the local authorities to work together, and indeed with us, to get the positive change that people would expect in the city region.
Question 4, Susie Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. How does the Welsh Government plan to support calls for a trial for safe standing at football stadia in Wales?
Well, these are matters, of course, for DCMS and the Sports Ground Safety Authority. They're not devolved to Wales.
Well, I appreciate that, First Minister. That's why I asked what you could do to support calls for a trial for safe standing. As you know, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives has done just that with Football Supporters Federation and Meeting Swansea and City Cardiff fans, all of whom support a safe standing trial. He's approached the UK Minister. The league clubs wish to lobby the UK Government on that issue. So will you join those voices, which actually backs the Assembly's voice, with a view to getting an effective trial here in Wales?
I understand the point, but I think we should be cautious. We've got to bear in mind that it was after a series of disasters in the 80s involving old stadia, that's true, not stadia that we have now, that we had the Taylor Report and all-seater grounds, and we should bear that in mind. It's true to say that there are some sports grounds in Wales of significant size. Parc y Scal has been one of them that do have standing areas. That much is true, and all of the Welsh Premiership football teams, they all have standing areas, as indeed do the Premiership rugby clubs. It's a matter ultimately for the Premier League and for the international football bodies particularly to consider. What I wouldn't want to see is alterations being made, for example, to the Cardiff City Stadium that then reduce the capacity of the stadium for international matches where standing is not allowed. So that's something that would need to be borne in mind. It's not something that I would be averse to as somebody who spent many years standing on terraces over the years, getting wet in more ways than one. But I think this is the sort of thing that should be proceeded with very carefully, given, of course, the difficult history that we've had with some of the old stadia that existed in the past.
Mike Hedges.
Well, somebody also stood on the North Bank at the Vetch Field in the dark days when crowds were quite small there. I still have the mental and emotional scars from Hillsborough and Hazel, and it must never be forgotten that people, including children, died at those sporting events. If it's safe standing is going to be trialled, and I don't actually believe you can have safe standing, but that's a personal opinion. Will the First Minister ensure that it is fully tested against both crushing and charging, which were the two causes of Hillsborough and Hazel, prior to any licensing taking place?
I think it's essential because what we have to remember is that the newer football grounds particularly were not designed to have standing areas. If we take out some of the seats or you introduce the rail seating, some of the Bundesliga clubs have, a full assessment would have to be made of how that would operate. And at the moment, of course, that wouldn't be possible given the fact that the Premier League, for example, requires all-seater stadia. Same for international matches. So the balance has to be struck between the understandable concerns of fans, and I understand where they're coming from, up against, of course, the need to ensure safety and the need to ensure that particularly the football grounds are big enough to host the international matches.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, as has been mentioned, we have obviously looked at Hillsborough and other disasters, but it is cited as evidence, whereas it was overcrowding, stadium layout and poor policing, not with regards to safe standing. So I think we should look at this debate in the here and now. And as has been mentioned, in German clubs, they do bolt-on temporary seats on terraces and they remove crush barriers. So these then allow and could allow Swansea and Cardiff to then be applicable then for, to put the seats back on for Champions League matches, and for example. So have you had any discussions with the Football Supporters Association about this? Because, league clubs in Wales are supportive of this concept, and we would like to see you take this matter on further. Well,
I've not been approached by anybody. I'm not sure if any of the ministers have. I think possibly one minister has may have been involved in discussions on this issue, but certainly it's something that would interest us in terms of practical proposals, how that might be taken forward.
Alan Roberts.
Mae yna wrth gwrs meysydd yn Awstria heblaw am yr Almaen, lle mae yna gemau rhyngwladol yn cael ei cynnal, lle mae yna sefyll diogel. Gai wyn i chi ystyried wrth gwrs am bod y cop mwyaf enwog ym Mhrydain, sef cop ar y cae ras yn Wrecsam, wedi bod ar gau ers nifer o flynyddoedd. Mae yna fethiant i gael gemau rhyngwladol yn y gogledd wrth i chi ystyried eich ymateb, hwyrach bod chi yn cynnal trafodaethau efo Prifysgol Glyndŵr a'r Clwb Pêl-droed i weld os yna fodd i ni edrych ar y maes yna fel esiampl yn y pen draw.
Byddwn ni'n hoff iawn i weld gemau rhyngwladol yn mynd nôl i'r gogledd. Mae rai fi wei. Fi'n cofio'r gemau Slawer Dydd yn yr 80au a'r 90au ac wrth gwrs oedd yna gefnogaeth cryf dros Tîm Cymru yn y gogledd. Ar hyn o bryd, wrth gwrs, o achos cyflwr y cae ras ar hyn o bryd a'r maint o bobl sy'n gallu mynd mewn yna, mae hwnna'n anodd dros ben, ond bydd fe'n peth braf i weld, wrth gwrs. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth i Brifysgol Glyndŵr i ystyried, i weld os maen nhw moyn ystyried y cae ras fel cae ryngwladol unwaith to yn y byd rygbi neu yn y byd pêl-drod.
Question 5, Nick Ramsey.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the protection of NHS patients' personal information?
Yes, the Data Protection Act 1998 classifies medical information as sensitive personal information. and as such requires organisations to apply strict controls on the use of patient medical information.
Thank you, First Minister. We're all aware that NHS employees are bound by the Code of Confidentiality and the Data Protection Act. This isn't reassuring, however, for a patient in my constituency that I'm currently dealing with and have had correspondence with the Health Minister about. The patient in question has been contacted by a charitable organisation that was aware of the treatment she had recently been receiving, even when her closest friends and family had not been aware of that. Whilst I appreciate that some organisations providing palliative care, such as Marie Curie Macmillan, may have a degree of access to patients' records, this particular charity didn't fall into that particular parameter. I have raised this matter with the Health Minister, as I've said. What reassurances are you able to offer Welsh patients and their families in this matter, and how will you robustly ensure that personal information is closely protected as much as possible, and that patients in future are not put in the position that my constituent has been?
I'm aware of the allegations. Nothing as yet has been produced to support the allegations, as yet. But I can say, as the member knows, I know he tabled a number of written questions to the Minister, that the Minister has written to the Chief Executives of 2 local health boards to investigate if any patient information has been shared with third parties without a patient's prior permission, and those responses are awaited.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, un o'r cwynion anffodus dwi'n gael gan etholwyr yw pan mae claf yn troi fyny am apwyntiad ysbyty fod y wybodaeth am y claf, y record y claf neu canlyniadau profion y claf ddim ar gael ar goll yn ystod yr apwyntiad hynny. Ydych chi'n cytuno gyda fi felly fod rhaid i ni gyrraedd sefyllfa o fewn yr NHS lle mae'r wybodaeth am y claf ar gael mewn unrhyw fan o fewn yr NHS lle mae'r claf hynny yn bresennol gan gynnwys yn yr unedau argyfwng?
Wel, allai neb dad yn erbyn hwnna, mae hwnna'n synhwyrol iawn. Mae fe yn digwydd, wrth gwrs, mewn rai rannau o Gymru, ond dwi ddim yn rhywbeth sydd yn gyson dros Gymru'n gyfan gwbl. Beth ni moyn sicrhau bod ni'n gweld y gysondeb yna dros Cymru, les wrth gwrs nid dim ond y cleifion, ond y system ei hunan. Os mae unrhyw fath o broblem yn y system sy'n achosi rwy'n i fynd i apwyntiad heb eisiau, achos dyw'r manylion ddim na, mae hwnna'n golled i'r system a hefyd i'n unigolyn.
Kirsty Williams.
Presiding Officer, patients rightly expect their medical details to remain secret and value the relationship they develop with their healthcare professionals, sometimes over very many years. Those relationships are currently under threat in the community of Llynwtyd Wells and the surrounding area, with the announcement on Thursday that the GPs intend to close the surgery at Llynwtyd. For many elderly people, the 13-mile trip to Builth simply will mean a meaningful end to their ability to access primary care. What can your government do to ensure that rural surgeries can be maintained and that those people living in it can continue to enjoy the relationship that they've developed with their healthcare professionals?
I can understand the concern, of course, of residents of Llynwtyd Wells about the proposals. Ultimately, of course, GPs are self-employed contractors, and it's for them to explain why they're going to remove a service in this way. I know for members of the public, people don't fully appreciate that is the relationship with a large number of GPs, but it's really for the surgery to explain to people why they feel they have to take this step.
Question 6, Baron Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you outline your plans for Welsh public transport network, please?
Yes, they're to be found in the National Transport Plan.
Thank you very much, First Minister. There have been recent calls by the industry experts that the Labour call to renationalise some train services have been deemed unnecessary. Now, we all recognise that there's an argument to say that the current franchise is not delivering value for money for Wales, and far more could be done for passengers. However, this simply reflects perhaps a poor franchise deal rather than a fundamental failure in the model. Now, given the high price of engaging professional railway people rather than civil servants to run our rail services, can you specifically outline the risks that you perceive in abandoning the franchise model?
Well, I have to say, in the days of British Rail, it was railway people who were professionals who were running the rail service. And that is an argument for renationalisation. I wouldn't argue that it should take the same form as it did then, but nevertheless, I think it's perfectly right to say that a not-for-profit body to run the Wales and Borders franchise is certainly something we have said that we are considering. And of course, the current UK government is more than happy to run what are in effect nationalised franchises in England on some of the rail services. I think approaching the the Wales and Borders franchise with the option of a not-for-profit franchise running the service is perfectly acceptable, I believe, to the vast majority of the people of Wales.
Christine Chapman.
Thank you. First Minister, I was pleased to note in the Draft National Transport Plan 2015 that one commitment as a medium to long-term priority was the investigation into the extension of rail services to those communities currently without, with a specific mention of Hirwaun in my constituency. And in Hirwaun, then, the track is already there. Local people feel that the extension of rail services would tackle poor access issues for public transport in the area, and previous studies have made a strong case for this to be done. Now, if this proposal did make it into the revised plan, what would be the next steps in taking this forward?
Well, I can say the Minister at the moment is currently considering the findings of the Cardiff Capital Region Metro report. I'm familiar with the issue with Hirwaun and people's feelings in the area. I understand that. What we will do now is undertake further detailed work to evaluate a programme of delivery and also to look at what is possible to deliver given the financial situation that we are in and in terms of what our priorities are. And then, of course, members and the member herself will be updated as that work continues.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Pan geiwyd y reilffordd o Gyfyrddin I Aberystwyth Prif Weinidog, fe wedodd yr aelod seneddol llafur ar y pryd, Elystan Morgan, fod ail na cadw'r reilffordd ar agor yn arbrawf sosialaidd godidog. A fydde ail agor reilffordd hefyd yn arbrawf sosialaidd godidog?
Mi wedi digwydd, wrth gwrs. Ni'n ar reilffordd y Fro, reilffordd Cwm Ebw, hwnna wedi digwydd o dan Llywodraeth sydd wedi cael agor I arwain gan y Blaid Lafur. Ynglŷn ag Aberystwyth I Gyfyrddin, y treni mawr wrth gwrs bod y trac wedi cael ei gymryd lan mwy na lai na 70au. Fi'n cofio tren yn dod lawr y trac yna yn cario llath o Gastell Newydd Emlyn a hefyd o Gili Eiron yn dod trwy Pen y Bont. Ac wrth gwrs gath y trac I dynnu lan yn gyflym iawn i'r gogledd o Aberaeron. Na, wrth gwrs, mae hwn yn rhywbeth yn y hir dymor. Gallwn ni ystyried fel egwyddor. Mae rhaid ni ystyried bod bydde ail-agor yr holl trac yn costi arian sylweddol. Wrth gofio'r ffaith, wrth gwrs, bod y trac wedi golli i'r gogledd o drwy'r Gyfyrddin, enghraifft. Ond o fewn I gwyddor, bydde fe'n beth braf I weld y rheilffordd yna yn ail-agor. Ond wrth gwrs, mae rhaid ni gofio beth bydde costiau sylweddol yn gwneud hynny.
Elena Parrott.
Lewis. First Minister, in March 2001, Sue Wessex, the then Welsh Government Minister, attended a turf cutting ceremony at the station in Bracklow. Well, the turf's had plenty of time to grow unfettered since then. It's appeared and disappeared from transport plans ever since. It has reappeared in the last December's draft transport plan, and a fortnight ago it was referenced in the City Region report as a potential new station. But given that people are making decisions on where they're going to base their families, where they're going to base their businesses in the future on the basis of the transport links that are available, how confident can people be that projects such as Bracklow Station, such as Hirwaun Station, go ahead once they make it into those transport plans?
The issue of Bracklow is twofold. First of all, capacity issues on the main line with the addition of a new station, given the fact it's very, very close to the existing Bridgend mainline station, literally a few hundred yards away. There is a real issue in terms of where exactly Bracklow Station would be placed, given the fact that Bracklow is mainly on a hill, and it would be at one side of a hill, and where would it be placed between the boundary of Bridgend Town proper and the village of Coitchurch. So Bracklow Railway Station is, although in principle welcome, it is something that is problematic in terms of the capacity problems that would need to be resolved, and in terms of where the station would actually be placed. And as a member will know, I declare an interest given the fact that I know the area very well indeed.
Question 7, Jenny Rathbone.
What appetite does the Welsh Government have to move to an area-based payment scheme for Pillar 1 of the Common Agricultural Policy?
Well, we have to move to an area-based payment scheme, and we will be consulting on the payment options for the new basic payment scheme in March.
The current scheme seems to be fundamentally inequitable, whereby, based on historic activity back in 2000 to 2002, people on the same type of farm with the same type of topography, one person could be paid £50,000, another £5,000 or even less. And it seems that these Pillar 1 payments are being sold, bought and traded just like hedge funds, so that the current system seems to be totally inequitable. And how quickly can we move to an area-based system where we actually stimulate the growing of fruit and vegetables, which is in short supply, particularly in South Wales.
Indeed. I was the minister who set up the historic, and rightly so at the time, because we knew back at the beginning of the last decade that to move straight to an area-based payment system would A, be very complicated, and we saw the difficulties in England over that with their payments, and B, would be an enormous change as far as farmers were concerned, in terms of there being a number of big losers and a number of big winners, and that was not a situation I was prepared to tolerate. That said, of course, that's some years ago now, and it doesn't make much sense to pay people based on activities that were taking place in some instances 12 or 13 years ago. So it was inevitable, and we knew this at the time, that the historic basis would go. And we know, of course, we're consulting on the move to area-based payments, which is something we are obliged to do now, with the intention, of course, of getting the right system for Wales in the future.
Russell George.
First Minister, the Welsh Government is considering a flat rate model, but given the fact that a single flat rate model was discounted from previous models for the basic payment scheme due to the level of disruption, can I ask you what action is the Welsh Government considering to offset the difficulties which the industry will be faced with if this option is taken forward?
Well, there is no option but to move to an area-based system. The CAP regulations state that that has to be done. What we want to do is to move to a system that is the least disruptive system possible to move to. There will be some winners and there will be some losers. That's inevitable under any new system. But we can't keep a system that was intended to work in the early part of the last decade as we look into the early part of, or the middle part now of this decade. It makes no sense to pay people according to what they might have been doing, well, it could be 14, 15 years ago. So therefore, the intention is to move to a system that's new, yes, but is as least disruptive as possible.
Roger Glyn Thomas.
Prifeidog, anewch chi gadarnhau unwaith yn rhagor y prynhawn mae fod y cynllun amaeth cyffredinol a taliadau sydd yn dod yn sgil hynny yn gwbl hanfodol mwyn cynnal a datblygu y diwydiant amaethyddol yng Nghymru. Ac hefyd yn eich trafodaethau gyda Ewrop, a wnewch chi sicrhau yn bod ni'n dilyn egwyddor sylfaenol i'r taliadau yma i bod nhw yna i gynnal cymunedau cefn gwlad, i gwneud nhw'n hyfyw ac i roi cyfle i bobl i aros yn y cymunedau hynny ac i weithio yn y cymunedau hynny.
No, hwnna'n wir. Ni'n gwybod wrth gwrs ynglyn â ffermio yng Nghymru heb y taliadau, byddai'n rhoi ran fwyaf o'r ffermydd yn gorffen. Ni'n gwybod hynny, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth hollol cywir i ddweud yn economaidd. A dyna pham wrth gwrs, wi wastad wedi dadlau taw taliad cymdeithasol, cymunedol yw'r system o taliadau CAP, mwyn sicrhau bod arian yn mynd mewn, defnyddio ffermwyr fel ffynhonnell falle, ond arian yn mynd mewn i'r cefen gwlad. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth ni'n deall wrth gwrs yn iawn, a unrhyw system bydd yn cael i ddechrau yng Nghymru, neu unrhyw system bydd ni'n symud tuag ato yng Nghymru, ni mae'n sicrhau bod y system hynny yn berthnasol i Gymru, yn hanesyddol wrth gwrs, yn gwmws beth sydd wedi digwydd.
Question 8, Julie Morgan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What discussions has the First Minister had concerning the latest University of York study regarding the approval of expensive drugs?
Yes, the study validates our position that a cancer drug fund is inequitable and disadvantages those with other life-limiting conditions.
I thank the First Minister for that response, and I note that he agrees that with the report that says the Special Cancer Fund drug in England is poor value, diverts money from other patient services, helps less people, and does he agree that the Welsh approach is much more effective and has much better outcomes for many more people?
More money spent on cancer treatment, quicker to see a cancer specialist, quicker availability of drugs that are approved by NICE. These are all things that we can be proud of in Wales. And we know, you don't have to take my word for it, we know from the King's Fund, we know from the Bristol study, we've known from what's been written in the British Medical Journal, that the Cancer Drugs Fund does not enjoy the support of the vast majority of the medical profession. On top of that, of course, we know the Cancer Drugs Fund is now being slowly choked off in England because of the number of drugs that are being removed from that fund.
Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you. First Minister, here in Wales, under your government, too many are now denied the chance of vital life-saving drugs if deemed too expensive. Thousands have signed the petition in support of Irvon Williams of North Wales, called the Fighting Chance, who, if he moves to England, will actually receive the life-prolonging drugs that he requires. Are you not ashamed, as the First Minister of Wales, that people are potentially dying as a result of your government and its inability to provide your Welsh patients with a fighting chance?
I challenge the Conservative Party to name a single life-saving drug that exists in the Cancer Drugs Fund in England. There aren't any. They are drugs that are prolonging, she says. No. She was emotive about this. She said there are people dying. Dying is what she said because of lack of availability of drugs in Wales. She cannot change her tune now. And can I say, she mentions the person. She mentions that... No, don't try and speak on her behalf, please. I'll ask the Leader of the Opposition. She's well able to speak on her own behalf. The point to make is she makes reference to a particular case of somebody who is allegedly going to move to England to access a drug in the Cancer Drugs Fund. That drug is being axed from the Cancer Drugs Fund on the 12th of March in England. So it will not be available on the Cancer Drugs Fund in England anyway from the 12th of March. So that's not going to help the unfortunate person involved. They should have done the research on that and they would have known this particular drug is being moved from the Cancer Drugs Fund in England within a fortnight, and that drug will then not be available via the Cancer Drugs Fund in England. So, again, I make this point. It is absurd to say, as the Prime Minister has said, that somehow people are being denied life-saving drugs and are dying in Wales. That is wrong, and I challenge the Conservative Party to give us a single example of a life-saving drug that is not available in Wales. They will fall far short on that, as they always do.
Alan Fred Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi ddim yn meddwl y bydd teulu Mr Irfan Williams yn diolch i chi am y math o drafodaeth dyn ni newydd gael ynglyn â'r cais yma. Mae Mr Irfan Williams yn dad i faban bach o dan ofal arbenigwr cancer yn ysbyty Aintree yn Lerpwl. Yr arbenigwr hwnnw sydd wedi gwneud y cais am y cyffur cetuximab. Mae Bwrdd Iechyd Gogledd Cymru, Bwrdd Iechyd Betsi Gadol, wedi gwrthod y cais ac wedi gwrthod ail gais hefyd. Yng nghwestiwn i ydy, oni ddylai ceisiadau anodd fel hyn gael ei gwneud ar lefel Cymru gyfan, yn hytrach na cael ei gadael ar fympwy, nid ar fympwy, mae'n ddrwg gen i, cael ei gadael i fyrddau iechyd lleol mwyn sicrhau cysondeb a thegwch.
Wel, gyda gai ddweud wrth yr aelod, fi'n credu bod e'n wir i weid weithiau, wrth gwrs, bod mae yna drafodaethau yn Cymru lle ni'n anghofio'r unigolyn. Fi'n derbyn hynny. Ac wrth gwrs, na gyd fyddai'n gweud yw, nid hwn bydde'r ffordd byddwn ni wedi dewis i ddi sefyllfa ei gael ei godi yn y cynulliad hyn, ond na beth oedd dewis y person gofynodd y cwestiwn i fi. Ni yn anghofio, wrth gwrs, bod unigolyn fan hyn, a unigolyn sydd yn delio gyda cancer sydd yn difrifol, ac wrth gwrs, ni'n derbyn hynny. Ond y pwynt yw, wrth gwrs, dwi'n sefyllfa ddim yn wahanol yn Lloegr na mai yng Nghymru. O helpu fi, o gwbl ni'n derbyn hynny. Mae'r cwestiwn yn cwestiwn iawn efo mani, a cwestiwn teg, a hynny yw, a dylai cysondeb i fod dros Cymru yn gyfan gwbl. Fi'n credu bod yna gryfder yn y pwynt mae'r aelod yn wneud, a fi'n gwybod, wrth gwrs, bod yna rhywbeth mae gweinidog yn ystyried hyn o bryd, wrth ystyried y ffordd, y system sydd gyda ni yng Nghymru sydd yn delio gyda ceisiadau fel hyn. Ac wrth gwrs, fi'n siwr bydd sefyllfa Irfan Williams a unigolion eraill yn cael ei ystyried mwyn i wella'r system yma yng Nghymru.
Question 9, Andrew Arthur-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What steps have been taken by the Welsh Government to improve eye care for South Wales Central patients?
Well, in January, we published the Ophthalmic Planned Care Plan to ensure sustainable ophthalmic services for the future, and local eye care groups have been established and funding committed to improve eye care services for patients in South Wales Central.
Thank you, First Minister, for that answer. One of the issues in the research that I've done around eye services across Wales, but in particular in South Wales Central, is the issue of cancelled appointments. In South Wales Central, for example, they've gone up by 45% in 2 years. I think you'll agree with me that's a dramatic change of picture from what patients would expect to be able to, when they're given an appointment, to have that appointment carried out. If that level of cancellation rate continues, obviously that's going to put huge pressure on eye services. RNIB identified that the tariff system that you've moved to as well as of November last year is putting inordinate pressure over the funding of the services. Will you undertake as a government to look into the delivery of eye services, in particular in South Wales Central, to get on top of the cancellation rates, but above all to make sure the tariff rate that you offer is suitable to meet the need of patients across South Wales Central?
Well, first of all, I know the Chief Medical Officer, for example, visited the RNIB very recently to meet with patients and to listen to their concerns. In terms of the tariff system, that is something we believe that is certainly more than adequate at this moment in time. He does make reference to a particular problem that existed at Ysbyty Cwm Rhondda over the summer, where there were cancellations and a limited service, more limited service than normal was available. I understand that arrangements have been put in place since for patients to be seen. Additional nurse recruitment has been undertaken, and now the backlog of patients requiring immediate treatment and the waiting time, for example, for wet AMD macular treatments is now within the 2-week guidance, but we will of course continue to monitor the situation.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2, which is